All right, welcome back to Just Another Solar Podcast with me, Luke Beattie, and Karl Jensen. G'day, mate.
Hey, Luke, how you going? Thanks for
Good.
putting the show on again.
And special guest today is the National Channel Manager of Clenergy, Guzzi. How are you today, man?
Good. I feel special. Thank you.
I probably should give a bigger introduction than that, man, but I think most people in the industry know who you are. And what
hopefully for the right reasons. Yeah.
Just want to get a brief history of how you came into Clenergy in the industry.
Yeah, so as a lot of you know, it was through the family connection. My father was one of the founders of the company there. And when they founded the company in, I think, 2007, 2008, around that period, I wasn't in the industry particularly. I was actually living up in a place called Upper Coopers Creek, actually just near where Giles Parkinson lives, up in northern New South Wales there. Living on a permaculture farm and bumming about, really, mostly. Long story short, I met a girl and had a child and needed to sort of, straighten my life out a bit. So I ended up working at the warehouse to begin with, at our 3PL, just picking orders, packing boxes. And then eventually one day I got the tap on the shoulder and Dad said, would you want to come and work within the business? And I said, yeah, sure. Give me anything but sales. I'd done sales in the past. I came out of the telecommunications industry. A lot of the people within Clenergy did, actually. They came from a company called NEC, a Japanese company.
And that put you off sales then?
Well, it was
communications.
I came in at a pretty rough time in telco. So, I was trying to sell key phone telephone systems to small to medium-sized companies and some larger PBX systems. But it was basically, it was one of those jobs where I walk in, very little experience. Here's a phone book, make some phone calls, which is rough for the best of people. It certainly tests your abilities as far as, your ability to deal with rejection. And so I'd had that experience previously. And then I'd also had an experience selling credit cards over the phone for ANZ for a period of time as well. So, the previous roles I'd had in sales were, I don't know, they're a little bit more raw and B2C, but I could always do relationships really well. I enjoyed that aspect of things. And I think Dad, he kind of knew that it might work out that way. So he said, look, come in, take a BDM role and just see how you go. And yeah, I never looked back. I loved it. And I fell in love with the industry too, really early on. Like the people I was meeting, it was like, I don't know, they're a bit wild or something. It's nice. Everyone's a bit different compared to, and maybe I'm biased, but I've worked in a few other industries, and it just seems that, the solar industry is something special about it, especially in Australia. It's very unique, and I love it.
And you joined just as the industry was really taking off as well.
Yeah, I think it was 2012 or 13, somewhere around there. So it was kind of a little bit after the first peak, I think. When was the first peak? Was that sort of 2010 to 2012 or?
It was 10 years ago, 11 years ago. So that's when the New South Wales feed-in tariff would have been 2010, 2009, even when that took off the gross feed-in tariff. And then WA wasn't, and Victoria weren't too far behind. The Victorian one was a net feed-in tariff, but it went for 20 years. So that was a big boom for Victoria.
Yeah.
And WA had one that was sort of a catch-up plan that was supposed to be 100 megawatts and blew out to 170 megawatts. They sort of announced, hey, there's only 10 megawatts to go, and 80 megawatts got sold in a matter of a couple of months. And I mean, shit, cut it off.
At the time, they couldn't even quantify how many had come under the feed-in tariff. I remember, they gave notice straight away, it's going to end next week. We're actually not sure how far oversubscribed we are. They had no idea because it was still operating on paper back then. So,
oh wow!
Even then, under the 40-cent feed-in tariff in WA, they were submitting bits of paper to Western Power and to Synergy.
What do you mean bits of paper? What, they were faxing it through, or
yeah, absolutely,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And a lot of them never actually got installed. There was a deadline, and of course, there weren't enough installers to install everything. So even though you paid a deposit, you might not have got it installed before the final cut-off date.
Ah, okay.
And there were dudes doing like 3 installs a day. So they'd have, a 1.5, a 3 and a 5, and they'd load out very early in the morning and they'd be working till nighttime.
A lot of houses got paid off in that period, I imagine.
Sparkies were about $4 or $5 for a 5 kilo. It was $1 a watt to install it. Those were the happy times.
Yeah.
I think one of the old school installers in WA, Dave Smith, said that at that point in time, if he had dropped a $100 note on the ground, he wouldn't have turned around to pick it up off the ground. So if that's any indication. So moving forward, I think it's fair to say that Clenergy has maybe a cult following, or a better phrase would be a grassroots following. A lot of that's come from industry itself, and you guys are obviously doing the right thing to engage with it. But one of your other strong points is your media. So multi-channel media. How have you guys developed that stuff, and what have you found most successful?
Yeah, so media marketing, it can be hard to kind of quantify where it's trickling down and how it's working exactly. I couldn't point to one specific thing that we did where we didn't do like one magic campaign where all of a sudden our brand awareness went up by 1,000% or something. It's I think from the marketing media side of things, our media was shocking, and our marketing wasn't very good up until Samir Jacob joined us a few years back now. He's our international marketing manager, and he really turned things around. Before that, it was really me who was doing a lot of, or pushing a lot of the marketing side of things. And most of that really came through, I discovered Facebook and started to really get more engaged in the groups on Facebook, the crap solars and then, a little bit later, the solar cutters working together and quality solar. And for me, those became really important outlets. And also it gave us the ability to, I guess, engage directly with the people in the industry that were looking to better the industry. And that's why I met Jack Long pretty early on through those Facebook groups, and we became really good friends. And through that relationship, I met others and kind of started to see that there was a whole network and a community out there. And I really wanted to plug Clenergy into that community and make sure that we were, we had the finger on the pulse. So that was kind of where I brought things to before Samir started. And then Samir took everything that we were doing and just basically polished the crap out of it. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And also just started doing things that one, didn't have the time, two, didn't have the desire and to do, which are all the things that you should do as a company as far as marketing goes. But he's very forward thinking. He can imagine what people want to see, and he knows how to collaborate really well. And those collaborations are, I think, the key to having successful branding. Other than that, I think what we did early was we tried to really, just establish strong relationships with our customers and listen to what they wanted. And through that, I think we got a lot of word of mouth referrals to other, installers would talk or wholesalers would talk to each other. And we just slogged away and worked hard and tried to make sure that we delivered on all the promises that we made. That was pretty much it. But yeah, these days, if you look at some of the marketing that we were doing back in 2009, 2010, compared to what it is now, there was one of the original marketing brochures that we did. I think it was done by my dad and Daniel Hong, our CEO at the time, potentially. And it was just random. I think there was like a washing machine flying through the sky or something, and it was supposed to be symbolizing the future. And,
I wonder how they came up with that though, man. Did they have like a late night?
I don't know. I'm not knowing my old man. He has early nights, so I'm not sure. Maybe he needed a late night. I guess I don't know much about how our marketing compares to other suppliers in the market. I mean, I see others too that do it really well. I remember when Enphase entered the market. I think I was really impressed with the way they were like the orange shirt brigade walking through all the
trade shows.
And it's basic stuff, but it has big effects, like it's these little tricks. I don't know, what's it like with the rest of the suppliers, like who else would you say was a good example of marketing in the industry?
I can give you plenty of bad examples. I was fortunate enough to go to SPI in Las Vegas. Yeah. And we walked around there the first day and we looked at all the framing products that are in the market in the States. Tried to get some ideas as to how we could improve our products here in Australia. And we looked around, we said, well, there's actually nothing here. These guys are at least 5 years behind us. And the roof design of a house in America is completely different to how we build houses here, and it was a real eye-opener. But from the marketing perspective, people had their bits of aluminium, and there's a few guys standing around a dummied-up roof, but there wasn't really anything available in marketing there. And, of course, Intersolar, the Europeans really do their marketing really well. Such a vast array of products that, again, not even remotely applicable to the Australian market. We didn't really jump on the ground mounts and the utility scale stuff in Australia until far more recently. It was all residential type roofs, and we really didn't have a lot of products in those utility scale spaces.
One of the best marketing tools, in my opinion, is having the respected guys and the best operators in the industry using your product.
100%.
Speaking about it online. So if you look at some of the online forums, from Crap Solar, which you mentioned, to Solar Cutters, to some of the other ones as well, people tend to focus on panels and inverters because as a cost of system, cents per watt, it tends to be a higher proportion than the racking. Yeah. But then when you have the really respected guys talking about Clenergy or talking about whichever product and promoting it, there's a lot of strength in that. And that's one thing that you guys have nailed, which I was alluding to before, that the guys that we look up to and we respect and who are really breaking new ground and getting the successes are promoting products like Clenergy and some of the other brands. So yes, there's the official marketing, but there's a lot of strength to that.
100%. And we do stakeholders groups. For anyone that's listening that doesn't know what those are, and Luke's been part of them, I think a couple of times now. The effect of what we're trying to do here is to filter through, like we track all the ideas that come through over a 6-month period, right? So we get ideas for new products or just complaints even about existing products or services or the way things look or feel or whatever. We mark it all down and we put it all in a big bucket, and then we pull it all out and look at it twice a year at these groups, and we bring in people which we call stakeholders from the industry. And, we could have just brought in our biggest customers. Those are the ones that buy the most stock and, would have the most say. But I wanted to make sure there was a mix of not only wholesalers and retailers, but also we have governance people. So we have people that represent the Clean Energy Council coming through, or people like Glenn Morris come through and sit on those groups as well. And we also bring in just users, like sometimes just installers that are like mad passionate about solar, that have used many products and have a lot to say and give a lot of feedback. But also, coming back to what you were talking about with regards to the marketing side of things, we also bring in those people in the industry that are quite influential and the ones that have like very respected opinions online. A lot of times those same people are really the most plugged in on those platforms as well, and can kind of give you a feel for what the market in general wants, but through that person, I guess, they're able to consolidate a lot of those opinions and bring those to the table, which is really important too. And I think that has definitely helped us to really narrow down what things we should be working on at any given time. And so what we do in the groups is we bring all the ideas to the table. We ask questions about what people like about racking, what they don't like, whether it's Clenergy or others, whatever brands that we talk about. We catalog all the ideas about how to improve things, and then the stakeholders, and there might be 12 or 15 of them, they get to vote. And so we catalog all those votes, and whatever gets the highest vote, maybe we do 10 things out of a list of 40 that were brought up. Those 10 things are the next 10 things we're working on for that sprint, where we go and we just hammer it hard and try and release all those things over the next 3 to 6 months or whatever. And then we start again. And if anyone else that's listening wants to give us ideas, please contact Clenergy and bring them through.
You also have some news regarding wind regions and the impact that standards may have on installs.
I'm going to try and sound like I know what I'm talking about, but to be honest, I just crammed this morning with some of our engineers and said, look, just show me what's going on. So from a layman's perspective, I can sort of communicate this. But there's some changes coming through which are kicking into effect September this year. There's a few main changes that are coming in that I think are going to have some major effects on the industry. One of them is to the AS 1170.2. So there's some new wind standards. We're getting a new wind zone, guys.
Are they shuffling the existing ones, or?
It's the bananas in pajamas. So we've got B1 and B2 now moving forward. What that means is B2 is kind of like somewhere between B and C. If you go north, I think of Bundaberg, and then go all the way around the coast of Australia, down past Perth, B2, it's going to kick in as the wind region that used to be B. There's going to be a pretty significant increase in what they're calculating as the loadings.
Which means that you need shorter spacings or...
Yeah, smaller spacings. Also, if you go down a little bit, like just south of Bundaberg, where wind region B, around the Brisbane region, if you look at the wind map, that section is also increasing inland even further. If anyone wants to find out more information, they can contact either the Clean Energy Council, who will send through the details about all of this. Clenergy, we put together a sort of like a white paper or a presentation to help everyone understand the changes. Also, there's a new wind region A, which is going to be A0, and that's going to cover the majority of inland Australia. And you're no longer able to certify anything at a terrain category higher than 2. As the terrain categories go higher, so if it's a 3 or a 4 or 5, generally, a 3 is better than a 2 as far as your spacings go, right? If there's a terrain category 3, that's usually like a built-up sort of residential or commercial area where there's lots of buildings around and heaps of wind blockage and stuff. Terrain category 1's like edge of the water on the ocean or an airport.
Bondi Beach.
Exactly. Within that region, they're no longer going to allow anyone to go up to terrain category 3 or higher, anything higher than 2, effectively. Yeah, certainly I'd encourage all the installers out there to, once again, check out the document that we put together which summarizes all these things and just make sure they're reading the install guides, the way they normally do things within the max spacings. Yeah, for sure.
So all the manufacturers that are currently operating in the Australian market are going to have to rewrite all their engineering documents to suit.
Yeah, anyone that wants to comply.
Well, that's a lot of work for everybody. Do you predict there'll be a few other players leave the market, or is this something that is another tick and flick for the usual suspects in the framing engineering department?
If all it took was to, have to update your engineering certificates, that some of these players would leave the market, that's a pretty sad thing if that's the case. They should be updating these things. Just panel sizes alone change all the time.
That's a great question. So, Sean, I got asked that exact question today. What framing have I got that would potentially go with a 670 watt Trina Vertex? It's like,
that's a fair question, man.
You're going to need at least 50% more framing. The things are massive,
How long are they? Do you know?
I think they're 2350 by 1150.
That's not bad. So, for example, like coming back to updating the engineering certs, we've just had to go through this all again for all the certs to bring them up to speed for up to 2.4 meters or even higher, I think, maybe 2.45 meters panel lengths now. Changing the engineering certs is something that you should do at least probably twice a year. Just the panel lengths alone would probably justify that.
So it's one thing doing the engineering, but I noticed online this week a lot of the installers came online and were talking about the OHS of handling these enormous whopping panels as well.
Yeah. 2.4 meters long.
Yeah. We're talking 29.5 kilos. So, yeah, we're getting right up there.
Is there another equivalent where someone's walking on a high roof with wind going and carrying something that big and wide?
Yeah, look, there's no debating at that point. I think you have to have 2 people. There's a debate at the moment where people are saying he can carry a 450 and we've got big guys and so on. And Luke and I have both been around for 10 years or more, and we've got customers that have been around for 10 years or more, and they say, look, we don't want big panels. We prefer smaller ones. They've got broken knees and broken shoulders from 250-watt panels, let alone bigger. Even the new round of panels from Jinko and Longi, and I'm sure others soon in 54 cells, but the panels are still physically bigger.
Do you think there's going to be like a tipping point where they shoot too far and it's like, nah, everyone just goes, fuck that, that's too long. We're refusing to deal with that.
I think some of the feedback online dealt with that, and they were talking about that the utility in large commercial globally, so not just the Australian market, really dictates the roadmap of the manufacturers.
Look, I think the biggest problem from a wholesaler's perspective is they're getting very difficult to handle. You can't put it on a truck and expect that a guy's going to be able to put it on a pallet jack. So he can't lift it up from the short side at all. He's got no access to the long side. And even if he did have access to the long side, we're at the limit of the handling equipment on the truck. So you have to have a fork or a telehandler at the other end to unload it. Comes to mind to me, if I've got a pallet that weighs 1,100 kilos, I can't just put it down on the roof anymore. It's potentially going to fall through the roof.
Is that how much they weigh?
Yeah.
How many panels are in these pallets?
At least 30.
Yeah, right.
36 is common for the 390, 400 watt panels. We're going to see 36 in 415s. And I think I saw an email yesterday that the 36 415s is a 900 kilo pallet. I really don't think you're putting a 900 kilo pallet anywhere on a roof without thinking about it very carefully. You're going to need some kind of gluts to spread the load across a couple of beams. That's at least deforming some sheets.
But people are still installing it, and you guys have increased your engineering recently, and you're trying to accommodate wherever the roadmaps are.
Correct. And just on that, if we're still on that vein of topic, so what I mentioned before about the new wind zone B2 and A0, those, there's more to come. So not only that, but we're also looking at a new roof zone definition change. So
Excellent.
you guys are familiar with corner zones, intermediate
Absolutely.
zone, edge zone.
Yep.
That's doubling in size effectively. So your internal zone is going to shrink. I mean, it could shrink up to half its size or more.
Right.
Look, that's probably not a bad thing, Sean. I've certainly seen plenty of installs where the edge zones have been completely ignored. And certainly on a tile roof, for our listeners out there, I highly recommend having a tile bracket one batten apart. So we're talking 650 at the ends of the array and keeping the overhangs to the absolute minimum. If you've got half a panel overhang, 1,300 gap to the next foot, the load on that end foot is huge. And even if it doesn't physically pull out, can quite easily bounce up and down, break a tile, cause a roof leak. And the quicker we can get away from those issues, they're expensive for insurance companies. I'm sure we're going to get to the point where the customer has a roof leak, insurance assessor goes out there, breaks out the framing, engineering says, actually, we're not going to cover this under insurance. You need to go back to your solar installer and he's going to have to wear the damage because he didn't install it properly.
That's probably the one where most installers are going to get caught out because the auditors are going to be able to see that clearly as far as the roof zones, whether or not they've put them in the correct locations or not. Any structural engineer that's worth their crust that knows about these changes is already implementing them. So, Clenergy, we're probably most likely already implementing most of these changes on our site-specific engineering certs now because it makes sense to do so. Also, there's another thing I hadn't mentioned yet, the way that just the building codes in general, they're applying what they call a climate change multiplier.
And what does that mean?
They've always applied kind of like safety factors. So, for example, I think when you were calculating things in wind regions C and D before, there was always like a safety factor, which is kind of like saying, this is what we think it's going to be, worst case scenario, but now we're going to apply 10% more or 5% more just to be sure. They're removing the safety factors from wind region C and D, but they're applying this climate change multiplier, which is quite a bit more stringent as far as the safety factor goes. And so that too, in conjunction with all the other things that we've talked about, is also coming into play. And it's going to affect everything, the way that buildings are built in general, but certainly for solar, it's going to affect your spacings on your feet.
Wow. So we're even talking changes to the way your volume builders build houses and how they attach the roof to the house.
Yeah. From what I understand, this is trickling down through the building code, because I don't think the old way of doing things applies anymore. 1 in 500 year storm.
Twice in the last 2 years.
So, where do you go from there?
And houses have been built differently. I mean, we've got a house that was built in the 1980s in Perth, and all of the roof timbers and the framing is Jarrah, which is now a highly expensive timber, whereas you go through the new builds, they're either using the steel frames or they're using pine, but we're not talking big, thick sections of pine. We're talking minimal materials.
Indeed. We've seen that in Victoria. No one builds a tin roof with timber battens. The long ways bit that you screw your sheets to, they're typically done with a steel top hat now. I'm guessing that we're probably going to be looking for different screws rather than wood screws to accommodate for that as well.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So Karl, you're seeing a move more towards steel than timber for.
Yeah, so they're attaching a steel hat section on top of the timber A-frames, if you will. The timber shortage has certainly brought that about very quickly.
A couple more things. So that was AS 11070.2. There's also a couple of changes to AS 5033. I was going to mention the requirement for a 25 mil earth wire, ground wire for commercial installs. So we've had to redesign our, we were about to release a new earth lug recently, just before we were going to hit go. The cool thing about that lug is it's different to the old one, and it can fit like a way fatter cable or cables inside. But yeah, we've had to sort of stop the manufacturing on that, and basically we're going to release it to be able to accommodate at least 25 mil grounding wise. And the other one is the disconnection point instead of the isolators on the roof. I presume that was spoken about as well. Or?
Yay! Yep.
Yeah. So we've got a product in the mix almost ready to go on that one as well. It's a shroud, so it'll still be a covered solution. Those are the main things as far as the standards that I was able to cram in and work out this morning with the real people that know what they're talking about.
On that note, Sean, Clenergy has quite a few engineers, and you offer site-specific engineering for commercial jobs, and you have done that for a little while now. It was a bit of a secret there for a while, but that's something that someone can approach you and get these days fairly readily.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they can approach their wholesalers as well. A lot of the wholesalers are trained up on how to facilitate the sale of those certs. Yeah, that's something that we put together now probably 3-4 years ago, and slowly have started building that team. We saw that there was a gap in the market, in that I believe that some of the more traditional engineering companies that were certifying the installs, they were kind of missing the point a little bit from a commercial understanding perspective. And so, they'd start something, they'd do a lot of work, and then they present you with something that was never going to be commercially viable. And you still have to pay for it, obviously. And that was a frustration for us for many years. And that was the driver behind us wanting to create the engineering team internally. We still get the certifications, the structural engineering certifications certified externally by an insured agent of ours, basically, who does all the final checks. But we've got a team now of 2 or 3 people that are purely dedicated to doing structural engineering certifications for commercial jobs, but also, like I said earlier, when we're constantly updating our generic engineering certs, we have basically a full-time staff member, structural engineer, almost 100% of the year just updating our generic engineering certs.
And for those projects that fall within the off-the-shelf engineering, the Easy Quote tool is something that we've been training our customers in, and I point people towards, because all of that information's backloaded into it. It's probably the simplest tool I've had to design racking, both roof mount and ground mount.
That's good feedback. Thank you. I'm so proud of that tool. Hey, like the amount of work that went into that, and the amount of just iterations. It's so cool to have an internal IT staff that can program these things. Yeah, we've got a team based out of headquarters that, once again, are really keen to get feedback from the installers and the designers on the ground. If they've used the tool, if there's anything you don't like or want to change, let us know. And sometimes it's 2 or 3 days away, and then you log on again and it's there. You know what I mean? Which is so cool. I love that. Without the feedback from people like yourself and others, Luke gives a lot of feedback at stakeholders groups and through the Facebook groups and wherever. A lot of times it's true what they say. The engineers are there. They're not on the roof installing. They're in the office. You know what I mean? They don't know. They think it's one thing, but when you get it onto the roof and you actually do it, or you get conflicting data sometimes from people in the market, you need multiple opinions on whether or not 50 mil is the new 40 mil or whatever, right? That feedback all helps, and we write it all down and we keep it, and we try and, we do one, we do it for all generally. Engineering is a challenge too. One of the things that we struggle with a lot with our structural engineering, it's risk. And there's some in the market that are willing to take more risks than we are, as far as the things that they'll allow to be signed off on a roof or not. And so as a company, we need to kind of constantly manage that risk. And sometimes there'll be objections from customers as to, why is this product spacing a little bit more than the Clenergy when we did the site-specific engineering certificate or those sort of things. Those objections do come up sometimes as well. Generally, most people are always happy with the service, but from time to time, there's these really key projects where, we'll say, look, this is what we believe, and we're erring on the side of what we think is not an unreasonable amount of caution. We're not willing to go that extra step maybe that other engineer would be willing to go to.
And ultimately, it means a little bit more cost.
Yeah, but less risk,
less risk. Before we wrap up, Sean, there's a question we've been putting to the last few guests, because there's a common theme in the industry of people working very hard and having impacts in their personal lives as well, and talking about coming back to a balance where we can find success and we can work hard, but also we get that balance where it's not negatively impacting everything else. Do you have anything to say on that?
Have an understanding partner.
That's good advice.
That's what I would say. Finding a balance. Wow. I'm definitely not the right person to ask that question. I haven't found my balance. I live and breathe this shit. And yeah, I've been through a divorce. Luckily, it wasn't messy, and I still have the kids half the time and whatnot, but that happened through solar as well. Yeah. I don't say I would blame solar for that so much, but certainly for me in my role and what I was doing, there's a lot of travel. And plus you get addicted to it. It's fun.
I get the impression that whether it was solar or some other industry that got your interest, that you'd put the same amount into it.
Yeah, I think so. But like I said at the start of the conversation, there's something about the people in this industry. For me personally, I've never seen anything like it. They're beautiful, from the installers to the business owners to the retailers. I don't know. I really clicked. And work-life balance, to me, the main thing to look at is where are you at in your life and what do you want to do? If you're new in the industry and you're trying to make a name for yourself, or you're trying to establish yourself, it's not that hard. Just work 80 hours a week. And do that for 4 or 5 years and you'll do really well. But that's somebody in their 20s, maybe early 30s. If you're, late 30s, in your 40s or coming up to your 50s, I know a lot of people are in that scenario. I'm not. I'm, late 30s. I feel like things change and suddenly it becomes way more important to make sure that you got like a balance with what's going on at home. And
I tend to consolidate.
Yeah.
Not before getting the hard work in, getting success, getting things rolling first.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. But coming back to what I said, I really meant what I said about have a good relationship with your partner, your significant other. I think I've been very lucky that the girl that I'm with, she's very understanding of the fact that I do travel a lot and that there's dinners a lot and catching up with clients all the time, and nights when we should be sitting in bed watching some crappy Netflix drama or something, I'm sitting there on the laptop catching up on emails all the time.
No, boo.
Not as much as I'd like.
Suffering.
And that's helped a lot, I think, because I've also been on the flip side of that where I didn't have an understanding partner, and fair enough, because a lot of partners expect more than that from a relationship. There's nothing worse than having a stressful day at the office and then feeling like you don't want to walk in that front door at home because you think it's going to be more stressful when you get home. You know what I mean? So you get your home life, your relationship sorted out. And I think that has a huge effect on general health and happiness.
Good advice, Sean. It's probably really accurate. That's our experience with a lot of people in this industry. And that's exactly what they've done. It takes a long time to establish your business and your place in the world. And that takes a lot of time and effort. And having that support from your other half rather than them fighting you is definitely, but how one goes about building that is a different challenge altogether.
Oh, man, it's hard. I would consider myself a pretty decent negotiator at work. It all goes out the window when it comes to talking to my partner. It's like, all the things that you do really well in the office, you come home and it just all falls out the window, I find. Like relationships, how you do them properly, I reckon 80% of it's luck and the other 20% is probably patience.
Maybe they should start teaching it at year 12. English, maths, science, and relationships.
100%. And just probably drop a few of the other subjects that we don't use when we get out of school as well.
Indeed. Relationship counselling is part of our school.
Yeah. And budgeting. They should teach budgeting too.
Absolutely.
It's horrible with money.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Well, Sean Guzzi from Clenergy, thanks for coming on today, mate.
I had fun, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. This is the first time that I've, Luke, I've done my own sort of podcast in the past and whatnot. It's the first time anyone's ever asked me to come on and talk about myself. So it's nice. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, gentlemen.
We just want to thank you for listening. Please click subscribe and share to anyone who may enjoy it. Thanks again.